Weaker orders, investment underscore ailing U.S. manufacturing. GDP report reveals ominous Great Depression warning sign not seen since 1932. Thursday's GDP report shows the real disposable income has fallen off a cliff. Hey guys, this is Chris. Welcome back to the channel, and this is your daily news. So we got to talk about the Fox News headline. It's pretty funny, right? So I guess it's a horrible GDP. It hasn't been this bad since the Great Depression. And the basic gist of it, though, is that if you take it out of context, yes, it's factually correct. But if you put it in context, just remember that we printed up a whole bunch of money, had a lot of massive stimuluses, so things run up like crazy in terms of your incomes and also money that people had to spend, and then that money is all since gone. So percentage-wise, there's been a drop. But also, to be fair, there has been raising of the interest rates by the Fed, and this is something that has been going on. So they're going to be announcing, I believe it's going to be this week. I think it's like February 1st and 2nd. I think they're in their meeting, and the rumor on the street is it's going to be 25 basis points. I have no reason to believe that it won't be the case. It's interesting because the market's been extraordinarily hard to read this year, and as you guys know, this past January, a few stocks have been going up like crazy. It's funny, we were talking about Tesla just yesterday going up, but I didn't realize it, but Lucid went up like 43% in a day. So that makes me feel like that we're in a crazy clown market. That's just my opinion. Some people will tell you the bull again, but it doesn't really make sense to me when you're getting kind of weak GDP data and interest rates are still going up, and I don't expect them to go down. One thing that's interesting as well is there was a couple articles about the bond market, which I do talk about on this channel, but to be perfectly frank, people aren't interested in bonds. I don't know what it is exactly. I think the average viewer on YouTube prefers gambling opposed to safety. My particular point of view is always just manage your risk. You don't have to go all in anything. You don't have to YOLO anything. If you want to, buy risky assets, you can, but I don't think it's crazy to say, hey, just manage your risk. Keep some cash, get some bonds, get some stocks, pay off your debts, these kind of things. Don't just think you have to do all or nothing. I don't know. We're kind of in the world that I think it's cool to brag about either winning everything or losing everything. So I don't subscribe to that kind of thinking. However, it's really interesting. Like I said, the article was saying that the pension funds are looking at getting back into fixed income, and essentially kind of what was going on. Before, it's like everyone in their neighbor was buying up stocks during the stimulus because everything was going up. The same way that you used to hear a lot of reports of JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, the major banks were pushing crypto and this kind of stuff with FTX. But the times change, and essentially what you end up doing is figuring out the direction before everyone else jumps in. And I was mentioning bonds quite a bit. We'll see how this goes. One of the things that is going to be happening as well is you want to pay attention to company earnings, right? So for example, Amazon, Apple, and Google, and guess what? And also Ford, McDonald's, and Pfizer will be reporting this week. And it's interesting because, I mentioned Tesla before because that was essentially the big news last week. I didn't think their earnings were that great. They mentioned we're going to try to deliver 1.8 million cars. And even if they were to do that, the numbers were saying that would be a 37% growth. That's not your earnings, just your, growth in deliveries, et cetera. But it wasn't the 50% that people keep promising over at Tesla. So it was kind of strange. And plus they were talking about shrinking margins, and the projections were going to be, 17% margins, which is very, very different than say 30. So I didn't think it was that great. And you had the GDP report came out, it was also not that great. We'll see what happens with Amazon, Apple, and Google. We already know that Google is firing people. I think Apple's probably the best in terms of managing their employees. I don't think they overhire like the other companies, but we'll see. Who knows? That's been the early reports. One thing I will say though, there was a report earlier this week that I saw. It was some crazy thing of cell phone sales haven't been this low. I don't want to say it was like 5 or 6 years, something of that nature. But basically, people aren't buying as many phones as they used to. And one thing that I've mentioned several times on the channel is a couple of reasons I think, in my opinion. One is phones are just too expensive these days. And two is the phones are so good, we don't need to change that often. And it's like, you buy an iPhone, let's say, I think it was like we're in the 13s or the 14s. Maybe we're on the 14s right now. I don't know. But when the new ones come out, it's like, there's only so much more they can do to entice you to switch over your phone because there's only so many improvements that they're going to make. So they really need to, try to really come out with something crazy good to get us to come back in. I mean, I don't need 10 cameras on my phone, and next year there's gonna be 11 cameras, right? That kind of thing. So a big theme of today's news today, at least, was how the world is changing. And it was interesting. This was a funny headline. You got to read two versions of it. So the first one is McDonald's president, who made 7.4 million last year, says proposal to pay fast food workers $22 an hour is costly and job destroying. So if you read this version of the headline, you're like, oh my God, this evil, greedy CEO doesn't want to pay his workers, money, etc. But if you want to, I'm going to give you two different versions of it. If you want to read the McDonald's website, this is over on their website. This is coming from McDonald's. The president basically wrote a letter to the California government. So shots are fired. He's saying here, California keeps looking for ways to raise prices, drive away more businesses, and destroy growth through bad policy and bad politics. So McDonald's is coming out swinging, at least the president is, and basically saying, we don't want to pay workers more. You're only hurting business if we have to, which is a very interesting discussion. So I'm just sharing you guys this. I'll share my opinion in a minute here. But essentially, I guess the fast food workers in California are going to go on strike. The legislation there is looking at passing this thing called the FAST Act, and it's basically just going to, require workers to be paid more and more benefits, these kind of things. McDonald's president again is writing, simply put, organized labor hasn't been successful going through the front door, giving everyday workers the ability to choose whether they want a union. So it asked for a backdoor, pushing Sacramento lawmakers to introduce, pass, and sign a bad policy that hurts small businesses, workers, and consumers. This is actually an important issue, the minimum wage talk. I always wish we would have more realistic discussions about this and use numbers and ask economists and actually talk about it. So I think from the small business perspective, I completely understand. So if you're a small business and you find out that, say, you have to pay all workers, say $22 an hour, it becomes difficult to hire workers and be profitable. Here's the problem, though, also, too, to be fair, is if you don't have any kind of minimum wage whatsoever, right, then theoretically all of the, business owners, et cetera, could all, join forces and just not pay workers anything, and you have nowhere else to go as a worker. So I hope you guys understand the balance between the two. So I never, frankly, decide that, workers always have to get paid more, or that businesses always, can do whatever they want. I don't really talk like that. What I do say, though, is that I wish we'd have these discussions with real numbers and stuff. One of the things that I do know for sure, though, is that workers are struggling due to rising costs on your rent, food, gas, these kind of things. So obviously they're going to want to get paid more. And it's interesting because I think that the sort of, how can I say, the representation of workers by union has gone down considerably since the 80s. And I've showed you guys charts in this before. I could probably dig up another one, but if you've been watching my daily news, you remember the chart. But basically, it's not that many workers are supported by unions these days. They're just not as popular. But we may see a change. There is a possibility that if workers feel like it. Now, McDonald's is making the argument, and Amazon would make the same argument too. Well, workers aren't voting for it, therefore they don't want it. The counter argument against that, you would say probably something like, well, if the companies, and I think this would be technically illegal. Well, I don't know. I'd have to think about this because it depends who you ask. Sometimes these things depend who you ask. Like if a company intimidates their workers, whether or not they to join a union, and I say that should be technically illegal because we have a right to unionize in the USA. Right, so you're essentially taking away someone's rights and by scaring them like that. But the companies never necessarily want them to unionize. There's a great movie I've mentioned several times on this channel. It's called American Factory. It's a documentary on Netflix. I could just really recommend it. Again, I'm not coming on either side of either pro business or pro union or I think we can live in a world with both. But to be fair, though, in the world of Wall Street, they want to push profits as much as they can. So part of capitalism is just how it is you look for the cheapest labor you can and try to drive up those profits. So one thing, though, I do think is a real thing. If the cost of workers go up considerably, then businesses will clearly just go more automation, more AI. And I've said that all along. Even if the cost of workers doesn't go up considerably, they're going that way anyway. It's hard to avoid. And this is quite interesting. There was an article here about Americans are gobbling up takeout food. Restaurants bet that won't change. Yeah, they were showing data of the basic data was more people these days when they go to the restaurant or Starbucks or whatever, they're more likely to just take it home or eat it somewhere else. And a lot of this was due to the pandemic to sort of start this thing because people were getting used to it, right? Where the indoor dining was closed. We had that when we were in North Carolina. We'd go to places and they wouldn't serve you inside. Some places were really interesting is where they were drive through only. You couldn't even order inside even if you really wanted to. Like you would go into the store and you're like, oh no, you got to get in your car and drive around, kind of thing. So or you would just order on your phone with delivery, and it's kind of funny. We actually do that here in Korea. Sometimes you get coupons on delivery apps, so you just literally sit in the restaurant and order on your phone. It's kind of a funny situation, but the basic gist of it, though, is I think we're going to be limiting how can I say contact with people for these kind of things in the future. I don't think it's crazy to say. Homeless at Starbucks, why the coffee chain is bringing in social workers. It's like, what? And this is another one of those where like no one has real conversations about this stuff. It's so frustrating. I complain to my wife about this stuff all the time. But the basic gist of it is, can someone sit in McDonald's forever, right? And there was an issue. I can't remember. Was it like 4 or 5 years ago? It was recently. I don't remember the exact date. But there were some black gentlemen that were in the Starbucks, and they were waiting like 10 minutes, something like that, or 15. I don't know the exact number. And the employees basically called the police on them. And it was interesting because I just want you to just be honest about this. Let's say they were white and cute girls, something like this, right? Workers probably wouldn't bother them. And I don't think it's crazy to say, but I get it. If you see it through a certain kind of lens, if I mention anything like this, you just think I'm just making stuff up. But the way that you look, employees may treat you differently. Also, to be fair, though, it is a real thing, though, that homeless people just live in Starbucks. Now, these particular people, the first ones I mentioned, the black gentlemen, they weren't homeless at all. They were just waiting for their friend, and when their friend came, they were going to order coffee, which is a real thing. A lot of people just hang out in Starbucks. But you get in these crazy problems to where what is Starbucks to do? Like how do you set your policy on like who can use the bathroom and who cannot, right? And at the end of the day, Starbucks is better off just closing all their stores and just going delivery only because it's just too much political hassle to mess with. So I just try to give you honest assessment of these things. And one of the things that I think if you want to be successful in business and this kind of stuff, you need to really be able to talk about these issues, be it McDonald's and minimum wage, or be if you want to talk about, say, DeSantis and the whole Disney thing, fight, etc. But talk about it in an honest way that includes everybody. And that's my point of view. I've taught this stuff for years, and I will continue to teach that because I do think you can do business in a just way, is all I have to say about that. But unfortunately, it feels like things always swing either direction, and then you end up just making extreme decisions. So, but I feel sorry for Starbucks in this situation. It's kind of a no-win, and you're better off just closing off your stores and going delivery only in some places. Speaking of change in the world, Chat GPT, I see headline after headline after headline after this, and I could probably make more videos about Chat GPT. I just haven't, but I probably should. It's interesting. So for me, it hasn't replaced Google. I barely use the thing. Whenever I use ChatGPT is basically just to make content on YouTube, to be very frank, because I think right now Google is the leader, but we do see this thing coming, and also to be fair, like on your iPhone, be it Siri, or on your Android, hey Google or whatever. I think those things will get better as well. 100% they will. So this is the future, and I think if you're a young person right now and you're looking for a job, I've said it several times. I think cybersecurity and AI are two great fields. Alternative energy is another growing field. And of course, there's lots of other jobs out in the web. I'm just saying, if you want something like that I think is going to have a lot of growth, I think those two are something to be around. Speaking of change as well, they were doing a thing on how much time you save by working remotely. I guess in the world, the average is 72 minutes a day. However, it depends which country you're in. So if we take a look at this, China's the leader, meaning that if you can work from home, you're going to save 102 minutes a day. And I can vouch. In Japan, say 100 minutes, but I can vouch for that. Like for example, when I lived in Tokyo, you have to live really far from the center of the city because the center of the city is like ludicrously expensive. Like the difference could be, if you want to live as for example, live in Ginza Square, maybe you're going to be paying, 10 grand a month, just for example. And then if you live, outside a Ginza Square, maybe, an hour and a half away, maybe your rent / mortgage will go down to say 2,000, right? There could be like a 5-time difference, or, crazy amount different. It is a thing. And I'm sure you guys know this. I mean, who doesn't know that, right? If you could all just live in the middle of the city and just like walk to work, you would do it. But most people prefer to live away because it's just you can get a bigger location, a cheaper house, etc. So for the Americans, the average American is like 55 minutes you save from remote. And it's funny, I was just talking to a friend about this yesterday. He was saying he goes to work. I think his office said it was like two days a week, but he could theoretically do one. And I'll be curious your guys' experience on that as well. If you're saving a bunch of time from working remotely, I guess people aren't leasing cars anymore. I didn't know about this. We just talked about the that people were getting their cars repossessed. That's the thing, and I guess people aren't leasing anymore. But basically, it's a car shortage, and car dealerships evidently they don't make that much money on leases. I never knew that. I'm not an expert in the car business, but they make more money on selling cars, and so if there is indeed a shortage of cars, you're way better off just selling them than lease them. So leases aren't really going to be a thing until the supply goes back up. It's worth mentioning. And talking about cars as well, Elon Musk is under investigation yet again by the SEC in this regard in his full self-driving thing. I think this is a real problem for Tesla. I know the Tesla bulls think this is all nonsense, etc., but man, if the government's after you and they're investigating you for like possible false advertising, I would take that stuff seriously. And that's my opinion on that. The same way that Adani over in India is under attack by a short seller. At this point, I'm more inside of the short seller. Adani, I guess they're going to come out with a response, a 100-page response coming out soon. We'll see. Some members of the community that live in India said that Adani's corrupt, and that's about others to it, but not much else to say. Speaking of corruption, FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, evidently he's been trying to contact employees and various lawyers, etc., and he's been using like encrypted messages on the Signal app to essentially corroborate stories. So good luck, Sam. They're on to you. The government is, and they're saying, dude, don't be contacting people, and they're calling it witness tampering. So I guess they could charge him with that as well. So far he's pleaded not guilty, but it's going to be tough for him to get off of this thing. And speaking of getting off or not getting off, but I want you guys to take a look at a chart of Intel, and sort of why I talk about facts so much on this channel. I try my best to. The market is a crazy thing, and if for those of you old enough to remember, and I'm telling you guys, I'm pushing 50, so I remember when Intel was like the hottest company in the world. It was like the coolest thing since sliced bread. Look at the dot-com bubble. It ran up like nuts in 2000. And now it's just like, I put on the max chart. So it's still showing you have massive gains if you would have bought, the thing in the 90s. But if you bought this thing in the dot-com bubble, you're actually down on your money. It is a crazy thing. So, just because something goes up in the past does not mean it'll go up in the future. And I mention that because, the Tesla bulls, it's weird the stuff that people write. And sometimes I think what it is that they've lost a lot of their money and they're just trying to convince other people to buy their stock from them. Because this thing is down 43% in the year. I get it. In the last month, it's had a crazy run. It's unreal, but it's still down 43%. And in my opinion, I don't think it's ever going to reach all-time highs. At least the next couple of years. Maybe 4 or 5 years now. It's certainly a possibility. But I'm just saying, look at the chart of Intel. Nothing is guaranteed. And the other thing that you don't know, especially for younger people out there, there's a lot of companies that aren't even traded anymore because essentially they just disappeared. Now, I don't think something like Tesla is just going to disappear, but I just want you to understand that nothing in life is 100% certain. And especially when people give you the rosiest scenarios possible, that's basically an impossibility. So don't trust anyone that gives you the rosiest scenarios possible. Same way you could say don't trust anyone who gives you the worst scenarios possible. So I try to give you the best of both worlds, I guess, but try my ability. And that's it. So anyway, I do appreciate everyone watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.